Alrighty. Hi, friends. Hope everyone's had a really good week so far. Um, I'm feeling really exhausted, but nonetheless very excited, especially as the year comes to a close. I feel like I have very positive vibes for 2026, which I haven't said that in a really long time. So I genuinely feel like the energy is finally lifting itself up after many, many, many years in a really deep hermit slash cocoon phase. So I'm curious if anybody else feels that. If you can feel that kind of lightness coming back into after a really, really, really long healing journey slash cycle. But today, I really wanted to talk about the concept of conscious creation since I am feeling that lighter energy and thinking more about, how can you actually weave your dreams into this reality. So I wanted to talk about conscious creation, which is just another word for saying manifestation. I just don't like saying manifestation because I think it has this weird connotation with it now since it's really popular in like new age spirituality and turned into a trend. But I like conscious creation because it simplifies it and makes it seem like something that's totally accessible to all of us. It's just the process of creating things in your life and manifesting your reality, but in a way that's conscious and actually intentional so that you're not stumbling on the path and going left and right and up and down for years and years and years on end, even though that will happen and that's part of the process, but mitigating the risk of doing that as much as possible. And I also wanted to reintroduce myself. I'm Shivani. I am a medical student. I'm in my last year of med school. I am in the process right now of interviewing for a psychiatry program, so I'm really excited about all of that. I'm also a Reiki practitioner. Actually, today I did my first Reiki session on a hospice patient, it went really well, and maybe I'll make a video on that. But that was a really, really, really cool experience. And I was able to share it with the other social workers and medical professionals that were there. So it was just really cool being able to do that. But yeah, I really want to just kind of bridge two worlds together and hopefully be able to just bring light to some of these deeper, more metaphysical, philosophical topics that, I don't think we should really shy away from, especially in the world of medicine, because that's exactly the place where we talk about life, death, suffering, purpose, meaning, happiness, joy, all of that kind of stuff. So anyways, I wanted to talk about the concept of conscious creation and how you can reframe the whole process in your mind, because when we live in a society that really prioritizes consumerism and hustle culture and having to produce just for the sake of producing and to appease other people, you can lose touch with the creative process within yourself, and you can lose touch with how do I actually, like, what does it truly mean to create something, not produce something? Because those are completely different things, in my opinion, at least. Like, I think the word produce just has this connotation of feeling like a robot, which is exactly what we're kind of, you know, groomed into becoming in this life. But stepping away from that and stepping into the energy of conscious creation and also not falling into the opposite trend, right? Like a lot of people use the whole topic of manifestation in order to avoid the inner work, avoid the inner connection with themselves, and just kind of lay around and do nothing. And that's not really helpful either. So having a middle ground and a balance is really important, but it all kind of begins with the concept of the collective unconscious. So when we feel like we have an idea or a dream that's suddenly implanting itself inside of our psyche and inside of our mind and body, you have to realize that that's coming from some sort of a greater source, right? That idea is a light in and of itself. It's not just some random thought that your brain has come up with. Like if you really feel into it and you go into the way that it makes you feel, there is really this essence of the divine inside of that. And you can think of like your own dreams and your own insight as something that's kind of coming from the collective unconscious, and deciding to express itself through your vessel, and remembering that if you feel the need for this idea to come through you, it's because it's connected to other people who need to receive it. So the universe is very intentional that way. And it wouldn't make sense for you to, go on this whole journey and embark on this journey of creating something in the world if no one was going to benefit from it. That's just not a law of the universe. That's not how the universe works. Everything is very, very, very intentional. And you are always creating things for the purpose of other people who need to receive them. And the hard part is that you can't see that, right? You can't know the people who are going to consume the art that you put out in your life before you put it out. And so the motivation has to be intrinsic and it has to come from inside of you. And building that motivation is step number one in conscious creation. And so to build that motivation and to have that blind faith in like, how can I pour into this project or this idea or dream and not know what the outcome is going to be, not know if it's actually useful or if it's actually going to be impactful. And it begins with feeling, right? Conscious creation has to begin with feeling because you think about in life in general, like our thoughts have a lot of power, but I think sometimes our feelings overwhelm our thoughts. You can try to tell yourself to think a certain way, but no matter what, when you start feeling a certain way, it doesn't matter what you're thinking. It's like the feeling takes over. And you can use that in a negative way, but you can also use that in a positive way, which is that when you are trying to consciously create something and you feel that seed of some sort of a dream, so like let's say, like for me, the process of becoming a doctor, at one point was a far away seed and a dream that I had when I was like in high school. And it took me 9 years to get to the point that I'm at today. And in those 9 years, I've experienced a lot of things that almost took me off of that path and almost completely separated me from this dream happening in my life, right? And along the path, like 9 years is a really, really long time. And along the path of becoming a doctor, like I lost I lost a lot of purpose. I lost a lot of meaning. I lost a lot of connection to why I decided to do this in the first place. I grew in so many ways to where I felt like I didn't even relate to this. And then sometimes I felt the opposite where I was like, oh my gosh, I love this more than anything. And I do feel that now. I feel that I love this more than anything. But it's so confusing when you're in that middle ground trying to create and to embody the person that you want to become and really create this like big beautiful life for yourself. And it begins with getting into the feeling, right? Like you really have to feel that seedling of like, okay, let's say for me becoming a doctor, I feel this feeling of like, I want to be a doctor. And for me, it's associated with this really strong feeling of I just want to impact. Like I want to be able to use my life for something that heals and has a profound impact. And that's it. That sounds so simple. And that's all you really need. You just need some simple feeling that you can attach to that idea that you have. And once you have really become intimate with this feeling inside of yourself, you need to access this feeling as much as you can possibly access it. So that means visualization, that means meditation, that means journaling. I like Pinterest because I think Pinterest is really aesthetic and the aesthetics really help to kind of rev up your senses. So you can do all those things. You can read books, even listening to music that help you tap into the energy within yourself. But you really need to tap into that feeling of who you want to become because when you tap into that feeling, that process of like just drowning yourself in that feeling will rewire your brain in and of itself. So you'll be able to really know what it feels like to have that essence, that embodiment on the other side of it before you even have it. And that's the key because that feeling is what's going to drive you through and carry you through all of the ups and downs, right? Like one of my favorite quotes is he who has a why can endure anyhow. And I think that the reason why I've endured like not only my life's challenges, but also like enduring a lot of my life's challenges, which have like emotionally and physically almost taken me out multiple times in my life. And the reason why I was able to endure all of that and still go through medical school and go through like college and like the pre-med years and the track and be able to get to where I am now, like I'm not graduated yet, but I'm almost there. So I think it's gonna happen. Um, but the reason why I was able to endure all of this and get to the point where I'm at now is simply because I had a feeling of why and I poured into that feeling every single day, no matter how shitty I felt. I held on to that feeling and that feeling became like my flame. And so really like nourishing it and letting it come up to the surface and find an outlet to express it. Like even if it's just writing, if it's just walking and, imagining like walking meditations, or if it's visualization, whatever it is, like you need to have some sort of a channel through which you connect to this energy because the more that you feel it, the more that it will take over your body. And the more that it takes over your body, you'll develop this level of endurance that is impossible to really stop you in your tracks when you have that level of endurance. Um, And so once you're able to really harness the feeling, you energetically start to shift too, right? Because when you start feeling that energy of impact, for me it was, when you start feeling that energy of impact, you start acting like it without even realizing, in really subconscious and subtle ways. You start to act like it. The energy that you put out represents that. The way that you carry yourself represents that. And you might not have the physical success to really show for the way that you're feeling on the inside, but that doesn't even matter because you'll notice that people treat you in that way because you're carrying yourself that way, right? So once you really get past the feeling, you do also though have to do the mental work. You have to put in the work to change your mindset as well, because the thing is your brain is like a computer, and so you can use it as a tool, but you have to learn how to change the program. If the program is stuck in a really old way, that's making you small, there's no amount of you sitting here dreaming and feeling this feeling that's going to get you anywhere. It's only when you change your mind that you can then bring in the second step of the process, which is action, right? So first step is getting yourself to feel and consciously connect to this, bigger than you energy, and understand like what this image and this feeling is. And then step number two is connecting to the action. And connecting to the action requires you to do the mental work in order to change your mind, because action comes from habits, right? And so we need to build new habits. So you have to change the way that you think also. So when I was a lot younger, I never believed that I was ever able to be the person that has an impact. Like I just never believed that. I never believed that I was important enough. I never believed that I was valuable enough. Like I didn't believe those things, right? So how do I ever like end up, now where I feel so much more confident and like in this position where I can really impact people, if the whole time I didn't believe that I was impactful, right? So you have to really be able to overcome your mindset, and to do that, it's not really helpful. I don't think it's really helpful to shift from one polarity to the opposite right off the bat. So let's say your mindset is, let's say you just think that I'm unworthy, period, right? You're not going to just sit there and try to do a bunch of mirror work and affirmations the next day and try to convince yourself, like keep writing down, like, I'm worthy, I'm worthy, I'm worthy. That's probably not going to work because your brain is so attached and identified with the feeling of I am not worthy, right? That you can't jump from one to the other. So your first goal should not be going from self hatred or restriction or constriction or lack or scarcity, fear, whatever it is, to the complete opposite, which is like love, because that's not really going to be feasible for a nervous system that is so used to the fear and the shame and the doubt. You want to aim at first for self-acceptance and for neutrality, right? Self-acceptance requires neutrality. So actually you want to aim for neutrality, because ironically, once you find neutrality, you'll find that you actually end up accepting the situation because it's not good or bad. So you're just like, okay, whatever, right? And then as you start to really embody self-acceptance, the self-love comes in naturally. So you don't have to convince yourself that like I feel like I'm meant for all this impact. It actually is like a natural progression from um fear slash scarcity to self-acceptance to self-love. That part, the self-acceptance to the self-love part, comes really easily, but you have to make it from the fear to the oh my gosh, why am I tripping on my words so much? Self-acceptance, you have to make it to the self-acceptance part first, which is really hard. Um, but how you do that is really in the words that you use, right? So that the next part that I was talking about, which is first feeling, number two, action. In order to really master the action part, I think it's really important to master the words that you're using within your own mind. So for example, if you're trying to go from feeling I am unworthy all the way to feeling of, I am worthy of abundance, which that's a huge jump. You don't have to make that jump immediately, right? In order to get to neutrality, you can just start telling yourself, maybe I feel unworthy, but I am practicing. I'm practicing impact. I'm practicing abundance. I'm trying to think in abundance, using words that kind of help you like move closer and closer to that edge. So another example could be, let's say you're working on your health and you just believe in your mind, you just have this thought pattern that like, I am unhealthy. You're so used to living this unhealthy pattern that you just identify with I am unhealthy. So how do you get from a place where you believe my body is unhealthy to a place of my body is so healthy, my body is strong, my body is vitalized, right? How do you go from this to that? Well, you don't have to jump to the other side immediately. You can just incrementally tell yourself like, okay, my body is in the process of healing. My body is trying to heal. My body is helping me. My body is always working for me, these types of things. So you can work really slowly, and then naturally you will end up finding yourself to the other side. But I think that a lot of times when people talk about manifestation, they're like, no, brainwash yourself into the complete opposite line of thinking. But it's like, that's not realistic. So you have to really slowly, essentially, what I'm saying is use affirmations that are actually believable, right? Take one step to using affirmations, and not even just affirmations, just talking to yourself in a way that's still believable, but like productive, right? And then once you feel strong and confident in that, take another step forward. And eventually you'll make your way forward as you get through a state of neutrality and then eventually to a state of self-love. It'll happen effortlessly, I promise you, but the key is like really taking it slow. So using the correct verbiage is really helpful to um, creating the right action, because I find that you don't actually have to force yourself to take action. Action can come very effortlessly to you, and it can come to you through the form of inspiration. You actually don't have to force yourself to do anything, and you don't have to feel like I have to do this. I have to go out of my way and do this. I have to go create this. I have to make this video. I have to go work out. That won't happen, right? Because when you change your mindset and you have the belief of like, let's say you have the core belief of like, my body is strong, then you wake up and you act like a strong person. You naturally just wake up and you act like a strong person when you get up and you go fight your demons of the day and you go work out and you go pick up a dumbbell or two and you put in that work, right? Because that's just what strong people do. So when you brainwash your brain into actually believing in identity, there's no like added effort that really it feels like you're engaging in, because it just becomes the effortless flow of what that person would do. And so all of these things combined really help you to consciously create in your life. So if you can get yourself to feel, and then if you can get yourself to change the words and the thought patterns slash identities that you have slowly and incrementally. And then lastly, if you can get yourself to tap into that inspired action, which again, that'll come naturally as your mindset changes, that's really going to help. Because also you have to realize that like your thoughts and your actions, they create like a loop, right? So the more that you take a certain action that's coming from self-love or from abundance, it'll reaffirm the thought pattern that you're trying to condition yourself into believing. And then that thought pattern will reaffirm that action. And so then it just becomes this effortless loop or this effortless habit that you form. The same thing happens in the negative way, which is how most of us are operating, like out of fear. And then the fear kind of reaffirms like negative behaviors that we have. And then the negative behaviors that we have just is like a self-fulfilling prophecy and proves to ourselves that we don't like ourselves. And so then it's like a whole process. But you can use that cycle and that habit cycle for positive things as well. So the more action that you take, you'll actually convince your mind that what you're doing is true, or the thoughts that you're trying to convince yourself of are actually true, right? So the more healthy behaviors you engage in, you'll actually convince your brain like, hey, look, actually I am healthy. Like, see, look, I just did that. I am healthy. And then the more that you actually believe that you're healthy, you'll be more likely to engage in healthy behaviors, because that's what a person who engages in healthy behaviors does, right? That's like the whole concept of cognitive dissonance. Our brains do not like cognitive dissonance, which is essentially when our behaviors or things going on in the world don't match our core beliefs and our values. And so your brain will do everything to shorten that gap, because that gap is really, really uncomfortable. So if you can get yourself to do more positive habits, it'll actually reinforce those core values and thoughts that you have that are associated with the positive habits, because it's real. Your brain is literally just trying to make you comfortable. It's trying to align your thoughts with your reality. And so if your reality is, negative behaviors and negative, engaging with negative people and all this kind of stuff, it's just going to make those negative thoughts stronger. So you want to break that by doing the opposite. But like I said, it has to happen slowly and you have to be patient. That's another thing, is let go of the expectations and the attachments, um, and let yourself really just like melt into that creative action that's inspired and coming from openness. And that's the biggest thing, is that this manifestation process, people have turned it, again, rebranded it into like capitalism and consumerism and turned it into this hustle thing, just, outwardly looking like it's spiritual. But if you're truly co-creating something, yes, it's going to take effort. I'm not saying it's not going to be hard. Like, it's going to be really, really hard, but behind the hardness, behind the struggle, there's going to be this feeling of like, I am meant for this. There's going to be this feeling of I can endure this. There's going to be this like, just, I don't know how to explain it. It's very spiritual. Just like this feeling of like of a fire, like I can burn through this, because I am meant to, right? You're not going to feel the opposite. You're not going to feel like an empty hollow of a shell of a person that's trying to expend energy where you don't have any. You're going to feel the opposite. You're going to feel like a fire. And just because you're fire doesn't mean that there aren't, like, things that you have to burn along your path. But because you're a fire, you can burn through it and you can make it through it. And, somehow, at some point, you make it on the other side and you're just like this big, burning, glowing fire, and it happens somehow. But that was long. I usually don't talk that much, but hopefully that's not too long. But I'm curious, what is everybody consciously creating these days? What are some ideas that are coming into your head? How are you doing that? Do you have any tips for manifestation or for co-creation, or how achieve your goals in life? And what are some mindset shifts that you've had? But yeah, other than that, I shall see y'all later. Bye.